I am trying through my art to make a statement about the times in which I live, and I hope I am understood. I am constantly trying to express myself better. I am doing what I am doing because I am trying to be worthy of my being.
Born in Birmingham, Alabama, Bill Walker moved to Chicago in 1938. After serving in the Air Force, he worked with the artist Samela Lewis. Walker attended the Columbus College of Art and Design in Ohio, graduating in 1954. Moving to Memphis, he painted indoor murals for a local nightclub. Sprawling city scenes and busy denizens make their way into Walker's easel paintings from this period, and later in his Black Metropolis works on paper. The wall was built in the summer of 1967. It was produced by 20 different artists. The name of the artist was called the OBAC. We grew up on 43rd and Champlain, around the corner from the Wall of Respect. Aretha Franklin wailing for R-E-S-P-E-C-T from the restaurant jukebox. The candy store with huge jars of cookies and penny candy. Back in the day, the block was lively, full of people. The wall was the backdrop of our childhood, an ever-present symbol of pride. My mother, Florence Hawkins, helped paint the sports section. She wanted to paint something relevant in her neighborhood. Little did she know that she'd become a part of history.
I was a dynamic artist in high school, meaning kind of full of myself, but not there yet, and I heard about the Wall of Respect. So I got on my bicycle and went over there, and I didn't meet Bill Walker, but a couple of the other brothers explained that I was too young, had to pay dues, etc. So go forward a few more years, because that would have been in '67. And in 1970, I was attending Olive Harvey College. There was an art fair on 63rd and Cottage Grove that I was in, and I was kind of moody because that day I had gotten information that Jimi Hendrix had died. And we had already lost Fred Hampton the year before. So these kind of things resonated with me in a deep way. And Bill Walker walked up on me. He saw me at the art fair and he said, "Well, young fella, would you like to work on a mural?" I didn't know how to say no. I don't remember saying yes, but all I remember was come spring, I was riding my bicycle from 103rd, where Olive Harvey was, to meet with him in Cabrini Green.
I went with my cousin, Frank Smith, who was a part of Afro-Cobra. And I lived on 43rd Street. And at that time, 43rd Street was like a bucket of blood. People were afraid to go down 43rd Street because anything could happen. And when the Wall of Respect first opened, it just brought such a level of respect to the street itself, as well as to the people in the neighborhood. And the people in the neighborhood just loved the Wall of Respect. They loved it. They never did anything to deface it, and it just became their wall. And it permeated throughout the world community as one of the first murals in public art that people of color had created. And Bill Walker was at the forefront of that. And then you had OBAC, and you just had all these wonderful older artists and young artists coming together to create this wonderful piece that spoke to our heroes.
I was a student, and at the time, probably there for an NCA conference, because there were a number of times I came through Chicago from Northern to do things there. And Bill Walker was standing out on the porch, and I went out to have a cigarette. I was smoking at the time, and I said, "Yeah, I'm Arlene Crawford. I'm here. I'm a student." Well, at the time I was Arlene Turner. I'm here with the conference, He said, "Oh, my name is Bill Walker, William Walker." I went, "I know that name." And I was just, at that point, gushing at who he was. And I was just struck by the fact that he was this very quiet, kind of reserved person. We both smoked together. And we started a conversation. He told me, when he said that he was Bill Walker, and I said, I'm an aspiring artist. I'm going to school at Northern, and Nelson has brought us in for this conference with NCA. And he gave me a little bit of background of himself, but I knew that he was Bill Walker and had been involved in the Wall of Respect. And one of the things that I remember him saying was that, mainly the main reason I'm doing this and why I feel it's important is that our community needs this art and we have to take it to them. It's not like they're gonna really come to the Southside Community Arts Center or go to art galleries to find out about art. So this is my task. I feel that I need to take the art to where the people are and share it with them like that. And that just, to me, summed up the whole purpose of becoming a muralist. At that point in time, in the 60s, the Black Arts movement was was gaining its own groundswell and bringing art to neighborhoods, helping beautify it, was just so in line with its purpose.
After the Wall of Respect, Walker did a series of murals with Ida in Detroit, including the Harriet Tubman Memorial Wall. The two would return to Chicago to paint the grittier, current event-driven Wall of Truth, directly across the street from the Wall of Respect.
The folks at St. Dominic's facilitated our getting permission for this building right at the corner of Locust and Orleans that was locally owned. And that was the first mural that our program that was called just the Community Mural Project did. Putting up the scaffold was very exciting. We recruited a number of local gang members to help put it up, and one of the brothers and Walker and me, we put that up like 11 levels, I think, of 5-foot sectional scaffolding. It was pretty exciting.
So my first day there, mind you, I'm all of 18, and I get there and he takes me up on the scaffold. The scaffolding's up 5 stories. Back then we called these people wine heads. So one of the local wine heads wanted to talk to Bill because I didn't know this. Bill's working style was to engage with the whole community. So we're on the top part of the scaffolding and somebody's clanking a brick against it. Oh, I'm sorry, a bottle of Richard's Wild Irish Rose. And so he's clanking and the vibrations are shaking and Bill's telling me, oh, it's okay. It's so, no, I got to get off of this. So when he realizes I'm nervous, he takes me over deeper into Cabrini and gives me a small mural that I could work on my own, that I could stay on the ground. And the mural that I worked on was called No More Drugs.
Walker and Ida, along with colleagues John Pitman Weber and Mark Rogovin, participated in the Murals for the People exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art. The artists created murals on site at the museum, along with a manifesto called The Artist's Statement.
At the Museum of Contemporary Art, we published a manifesto, right? It was called The Artist's Statement, and that was the first mural manifesto in the country.
Here, Walker formally declares his dedication to making public art, realizing that art must belong to all people. Walker's contribution, the Wall of Family Love, was later installed at the Southside Community Arts Center. Through the auspices of the Chicago Mural Group, which he co-founded, as well as his own self-sponsorship, Walker would go on to paint some of his most iconic murals in Chicago. Among those still standing are The History of the Packing House Worker, Childhood is Without Prejudice, and The Wall of Daydreaming and Man's Inhumanity to Man. While these three works have enjoyed the benefits of restoration, other Walker works, like Peace and Salvation and All of Mankind, have not been so fortunate. I was riding home with Purcell Williams when he pulled over into an empty parking lot near Cabrini Green. Reluctantly, I tramped with him across the lot, squaring off against that cold Chicago hawk until we came to an old church. The black and white paint was old and peeling. The vacant space around it was so forlorn, it seemed to be in black and white too. This was what remained of Bill Walker's All of Mankind, painted in 1973. Comprised of indoor as well as outdoor murals, All of Mankind was Walker's masterwork, a requiem for fallen heroes and a call for harmony across racial and religious lines.
As a resident of the South Side, I passed by that viaduct on 57th Street more than once as I was growing up. And I recall when the mural was being created. And one of the things that impressed me the most was the idea that Bill's images for the mural, Children Are Without Prejudice, they were so simple and positive and universal. And it, for the first time, gave me the sense of the importance of choosing your imagery when you're trying to tell a story. I was familiar with a lot of public imagery that was maybe more violent, that would show, for example, police brutality or show people in kind of angry states at each other. But this one was sending a similar message in terms of peace and unity, but it was doing that without invoking any negative images at all. And so to me, that kind of changed my thinking about public images. And I've internalized those kind of ideas and theories in my own work ever since.
4 figures, 2 male, 2 female, clearly representing different races or people from different parts of the world. And the fact that he did that in the midst of Cabrini Green in 1973-74 said to me that he had a vision of the unity of mankind that we're still struggling with today. And that was not what was in our cultural dialogue at that time. At that time, we were much more about the strength of individual races and the importance of identity within different races. And yet in that moment, the fact that Bill could conceive of that work, which was done in Detroit, I believe first, and then in Chicago, this extraordinary iconic image that said we are human beings. And then with the following of that and the question in the church at the church of why were they killed? And the examination of the people who were martyred or murdered, and famous people and not so famous people who were named, but the calling to us of what does it actually mean to be human if this is what human beings can clearly do to each other. And so I felt like that was a message which, when he made it in Cabrini Green, was for a much larger world than was seen at that time. I remember when I first saw it, I was a little anxious because I was in Cabrini Green. I was a youngish white guy and I didn't know my way around all that well. But I understood very quickly what an extraordinarily powerful image that was, because it was not a declamatory image. It was not asserting a particular position or rightness. It was calling on us to reflect on what it means to be humans. And I think that we still have not figured that out, obviously. We're struggling with it internally within this country and within the world on the whole. But I think that Bill was on a visual image there that was way ahead of its time and still ahead of our time now as we continue to try to understand that.
All of Mankind became a real theme of Bill Walker's, and one thing I always liked about All of Mankind is the faces interlocked and they share an eye. So two faces will share one eye. So this idea that we see the world so radically different, Bill was challenging that there is a certain commonness to the way that we look out from our, bodies and from ourselves into the world through our eyes, and he wanted to bring that together. And he painted, of course, All of Mankind on the front of a church up in the Cabrini Green neighborhood that was a Catholic church at the time, and he'd gotten permission through the Archdiocese and the priest to not just paint the outside, which has become much more well known, but also to create what he called his Sistine Chapel, which was, he painted the inside of the church. And he was painting various themes from African American culture, history. The center of the painting was the black family, and he felt like the black family was under a certain kind of duress, and that it was really critical to the success of the black community.
The community for Patlán has shown what the impact is, as I'm sure same applies to the other murals you mentioned, but people came out and did a mourning, mourning, ceremony in front of Patlán with candles, etc. Very similar to what they do for Day of the Dead in Mexico. And there were protests. They've been tagging the walls repeatedly since that happened. They were outraged that this person would just come in and wipe out our history. And they pretty much forced him to call me back to redo that mural. And it's been a heck of a struggle. I won't even go into it, but it's been a lot of politics involved since I've been here. It's been 2 months and we still haven't put any paint on the wall. But yeah, it was viewed by the community as an erasure of us. The community itself as taking us out, putting us aside so they could move in, and create these high-priced apartments, condos, whatever you want to call, he calls them, or whatever they call them now, and leave us, with just this new building and the loss of our landmark, our a memorial, more or less, which was a real important community center since the 1800s, as John said. And it changed, from, as I said, the earliest residents to the new residents, the Mexican residents, and they saw that building as a real important part, many of them of their childhood, including myself. And it was heavy impact on the community. They weren't going to stand for it. And in some ways it should set a little precedent for future developers that come into our community about trying to wipe out our history. The alderwoman, whose name I'm forgetting, and just as well, probably, anyway, wanted to have the mural painted out because she said that it scared her daughter. And I think Bill sat down with her, with maybe some other community stalwarts, and explained that the mural was supposed to be scary. That if her daughter was finding it nightmarish, that's just what the point of it was. So the mural's still there.
What I would have said that I noticed about Bill's work is that it always had a psychological complexity as well as the artistic complexity. And I don't know how the piece on 47th came together exactly, but I know the piece on 56th done for the school across the street has a much different message than either of the other two. So I guess I would say that he was very site specific. He understood in a way in which the notion of site specificity has been important for artists in recent years, as sometimes things would seem to be put in a place where there was no context for them and there would be some discord about that. But I think that Bill really had a sense of how the specificity of the site, that the meaning that was to express there needed to be located in that geography and in that place. And that's what he did.
He wasn't angry. I knew him well enough to know that he wasn't angry. He had passion, but I think that's different than anger. And he was disappointed and maybe even disturbed by things that he saw happening, particularly in the African American community, that he felt were negative influences and somewhat destructive. So that wall that I think is at Calumet and 47th, and I can't remember the name of it right offhand. I know.
The Wall of Daydreaming.
Yes, yes. You know, with the very kind of gaudy, aggressive image in the middle of the of almost like a skeleton pimp who's overruling a lot of destructive behaviors, drug use and hatred of the Klan and other kinds of things that are going on. I don't think that comes out of hatred. I think it comes out of honesty. And you know, I think we as a culture, on this, I'm getting off the subject here a little bit, but I think we've become too comfortable without being truly honest about what's happening in communities in the city. You know, kids are being shot and killed and nobody wants to talk about it really, or to make it an issue. Bill Walker wasn't like that. If he saw a problem, he wasn't going to downplay it just because it happened to be in the black community. And I think that I respected that in him.
What was really interesting here, I mean, it takes a while to decode this, but it tells a very powerful story. You know, Mitchell he kind of depicted a lot of the, social ills that were very visible on the street at the time. So you can kind of see like the hypodermic needles, the pills, the bottles, the drinking, the prostitution, the drug dealing, and things like that. Bill Walker painted this was the pusher of 47th Street that he depicted here. The pusher with tombstones in his eyes, with a little, holding out a needle to people. Over here, what Bill did is he really tried to get at the root causes of what created a community like this at that time, and so you can kind of see, that's Kennedy, Malcolm, and Martin Luther King assassinated on the chessboard of life again, kind of like circumstances beyond our control of what happened with them. There's a couple prostitutes carrying a pimp on their back right there in that Cadillac. There's the greedy power brokers and poverty pimps that used to run neighborhoods like this and would take all the money from anti-poverty programs and keep it for themselves and not benefit the community. That was happening a lot back then with a lot of city and federal programs. So there's the poor hungry kids, and also Bill did in a lot of his murals. You see these images of Klansmen, and white extremists, and like Nazi figures, like over there too. There's like a swastika. Those were his way of kind of symbolizing, the racism that was involved in a lot of these.
He was not one for fanfare. He didn't like a whole lot of attention. And yet I think he was a conflicted man. I mean, I think, you know, behind that veneer of standoffishness, because he was a bit standoffish, there was probably a craving for more attention. I'm not trained as a psychologist, but when I would get together with him, there seemed a little of that. You know, he would always tell me, Brother Sorrel, I'm grateful that you and Bob did this work about me.
In the same way that Bill talked a lot about humanity as a whole. A lot of times he didn't always fit in certain organizations, because he'd bust out in a conversation about Siqueiros or Orozco or Rivera, and they didn't have anything to say, you know? They didn't have anything to say, but he's flowing through this continuum of a tradition of being among people and what the mural movement had to offer.
You know, Bill was a shy kind of person. He was really always, at least in my opinion, or my observation, he wasn't really somebody that was even wanting a lot of attention or to be in the forefront of anything. He just wanted, you know, in my opinion, he just wanted to do his work. He wanted to be known only as being consistently out here, consistently giving art to his community. He was very, very political in his ideas about art and his ideas about politics and the community. I mean, he and Margaret and Charlie Burroughs at the time were, you know, the communists, quote unquote. And that, I think, was seen as, you know, taboo in some areas. Like I remember reading Harold Cruz in college, The Crises of the Negro Intellectual, and how there was a period that, you know, politically our intellectuals became communists, but then the McCarthy era put a negative spin on that, and it didn't help them economically or socially to be associated with that energy. But he was always committed to it. I know Bill was very much committed to his political stance. And he was a Marxist in that, and that was why he did his work, why he had his commitment to community and people, and I think that might have been why, you know, he didn't get the notoriety of it.
Piece is going to be a mural. It's going to be a 95-foot mural on Gallery 5 on the second floor of the Hyde Park Art Center. And the mural is entitled Embedded. And it's dealing with the idea of artist as citizen. And when I think of Bill Walker, Bill to me he exemplifies that idea, is that his work he used as a means of being a better citizen. He used his work to contribute to community positive imagery that was missing at the time. And so I think of the word embedded in terms of its ideology, that if our communities were embedded with more of our art, African American communities specifically, embedded with more of our cultural identifiers, and embedded with a higher artistic aesthetic, and I mean publicly, say versus what we do see now, which is blight, vacant properties, advertising pollution everywhere. So my mural is going to be kind of looking in a more futuristic idea of what Black neighborhood could be if we embrace the idea of embedding more art and culture in our public environments. So I'll be looking to Bill's techniques and some of his design ideas and kind of incorporating those with my own aesthetic.
We were asked to do a gathering space in the Burnham Wildlife Corridor, and when Dorian, Raymond, and I got together, we kind of brainstormed ideas, and one of the things we wanted to deal with was some kind of wall of respect. And because we knew that the next year Wall of Respect was going to be celebrating 50 years, so we talked about a lot of ideas, and I think Dorian's idea was to come up with a Sankofa bird.
No. It was Arlene's idea. No, let me correct this right now. Really, the foundation of the whole concept was Arlene's. And she really came with the proposal. Now, we all threw out ideas, but Artie's really resonated the most. And I mean, visually, I kind of evolved the design of the Sankofa, but it was Artie's brainchild, and we just kind of came together and all supported that idea because we felt it was the strongest, and it was. It won the award. You know, that's what got us over.
Yeah, the thing was we wanted to have like our own form of it, and we talked a little bit about the kiosk font idea, and I know Raymond came up with putting QR codes in it, and I thought that was a great innovation in terms of taking the imagery that we put, because the outside of Sankofa was the bird, and on the inside we opened it up to have a painted form.
Right.
And that was Dorian's brainchild, to opening it up to then add some mural ideas. And then we pulled out who we wanted in the mural, and we wanted to highlight Dr. Burroughs, things that the Great Migration, things that were happening on the South Side, the South Side Community Arts Center, and within that we could cue them up to with the Q codes, face pages. I mean.
To the websites.
Right. So people who came through to the gathering space take a rest, they take out their phone, they could learn information, they could get the history of what was going on. And I thought that was tough.
And get connected, you know. I mean, Artie and I are a little old school, so it would have never in a million years occurred to us to do QR codes. But when Raymond brought up the idea, it was just like, of course, because it's not about just engaging them with just that particular piece of art, but how do you go further? How do you learn more about these people, these heroes, these institutions, these organizations? And so, taking advantage of that modern technology just, helped to give the sculpture even a broader voice, broader relevance.
Yeah. And make it more so a wall of respect that historically would have some content too. Yeah.
I think they play the same role they play in all times. One role they play in crazy times is a healing kind of role. They have a healing property, a cathartic kind of like healing property about it. There's that. Then there's they can inspire you, motivate you to do what you need to do. They have that role. They have that purpose. Those are the main two. Just be true to yourself and true to your craft. Whatever your craft is, just work at being the best at that, and then at the same time being true to yourself, which first requires you to get to know yourself, right? So as a young, artist, it's about self-discovery and self-expression, and putting that first, before doing the work to appease somebody else or to make some money or.
My brother, Oscar Brown III, who we call Bobo. Bo Brown was into a musician, a bassist, and a singer and songwriter. So he and I had a band, and I started doing what, is the normal course of action, get in wedding bands and get some gigs and stuff, and started Columbia College. But I realized one day I needed to develop something that would be edutainment. Dad was the first person I heard use that term, educational entertainment. And, it made sense at the point when Oscar really turned his attention from being more of a star, sort of ascending in this, with a great show on the north side called Joy, but he wanted to do a show on the south side. But in order to do a show on the south side, the gangs, the Blackstone Rangers that were prominent then, they were kind of terrorizing and keeping things in the headlines that scared away the audience. So Dad went in and talked to them, and he ended up doing a show with them. Instead of even just for them or just, meeting some demands, he, forged a relationship and realized the beauty, the gold in the ghetto, as he would always say. And it changed the course of his life, his career, his focus in his art, whereas Oscar, I know, was never just really for the commercial sake of getting on charts and selling units. It was never so much about that. He always was, as they'd say, messagey. But I think I relate to Bill because of how I relate to my father, how I relate to, I feel that's what I'm supposed to do, is come with that message. If things are going pretty wrong in our world, then it's not time to just relax and act like, oh, just wave your hands like you just don't care. No, it's about use your art, use your platform, use your voice to say something that's hopefully going to move us forward, that's going to help us toward something ascending from the situation that is plaguing us.
I convened a think tank of artists, writers, collectors, and educators to Candace Hunter's Coach House. There, over homemade peach cobbler and pecan pie, I learned about the struggle to save all of mankind while we brainstormed what would evolve into Bill Walker Urban Griot. I received great advice, partnered with other venues, and pulled this work out of hibernation and let the world see it.
We talked about the importance of Bill's work, the fact that it was obscure to some, despite the fact that it was as important an output as any in Chicago, if not more so. And we thought that something needed to be done. So we, at the time, saw that Bill was beginning to abandon muralism itself and was beginning to work on portable pieces, what became the 3 series that Chicago State now owns. The Reaganomics series for blacks only, and the I Love You, sort of a take on a mixed kind of patriotism. And we decided that those pieces should be exhibited because they were more manageable and they hadn't been seen very much. So we approached him with the idea, and he was very, very pleased to work with us on it.
With 2017 marking the 50th anniversary of the Wall of Respect, Bill Walker's work is garnering a wider audience with exhibitions and new scholarship. Bill Walker believed in the power of truth to save mankind from its own destruction. Given the current political climate, there's no better time to share this important body of work. With Bill Walker Urban Griot, we hope to build upon Walker's legacy to inspire a new generation of socially engaged artists and scholars.
Art is also seen as a force designed to dethrone ignorance from its pedestal of influence in the affairs of man. These barbaric, irrational forces born in ignorance create a state of terror that is a luxury which no man can afford. People are now realizing that public art is essential because it is relevant to each of them. Art is a universal language, destroying the barriers that stand so firm before man. The artist and his art are warning man of the dangers ahead. If man fails to understand this, total destruction may surely come. Tony Smith.
Okay.